All right, you guys. So today we've got our lesson 5.4, day 1. We are talking about direct measurements. You'll want to follow along in your notes packet with this lesson. So first up is determining smallest divisions of an inch for each ruler. So it's pretty simple. You just count how many tick marks from 0 to 1, and that's going to determine your smallest division. So for A, we are divided out into 1/8 inch parts because we have 8 tick marks from 0 to 1. For B, we are divided into 1/5 of an inch. For C, we've got 1/10 of an inch. And then finally for D, we've got 1/16 of an inch. Reading tape measures. We're going to do just A, C, E, and F. And we're going to make sure to express all of our fractions in lowest terms. So the first thing you guys want to make sure you look at is we've got a little 8 and a little 16. That tells you what the smallest divisions are for the top and bottom part of your tape measure. So the top part then would be in 1/8 of an inch, and the bottom would be in 1/16 of an inch. So if I look at where arrow A is located, we are at 6/8 of an inch. We're not quite to 1 full inch. All right, we are at 6/8, which is going to reduce then to 3/4 of an inch. For C, we are a little bit past 3 inches, and we're at 3 1/8. For E, we are on the bottom part of our tape measure, which means that we're going to be in 1/16 of an inch, and that one falls at 13/16. And then lastly, we've got measurement F, which is a little bit past 1.5 inches. We're at 1 9/16 of an inch. All right, next tape measure. For this one, our top row of values are in 30/2 of an inch, and the bottom row is in 60/4. So A falls at about 7/32 of an inch. C is going to be at 1 15/32. So it's past the 1, but it's not quite the 2. E is on the bottom row, so we're in 60/4 of an inch, and E falls at 58/64, which reduces to 29/32 of an inch. And then lastly, F is located at 1 37/64 of an inch. All right, our last tape measure, this one is going to be in tenths for the top and hundredths for the bottom. So we are told to express our answers in decimal form. So if I look at where measurement A is located, I'm at 4/10. 4/10 is going to be expressed as 0.4 as a decimal. For C, we are at 1 2/10 of an inch, so 1.2 in decimal form. Then going to the bottom, we're in hundredths of inches, so we are at 1 4/100ths, or 1.04. And then lastly, F is located at 1 10/100ths, which is 1.10 inches. All right. Next up, we are going to be reading different types of meters. So meters can be used to measure voltage, current, air pressure, speed. There's a lot of different applications for meters. The range of a meter represents the maximum reading. So how far up can this meter read to? Your main divisions are going to be numbered. And then your small divisions are going to be those portions that are marked in between. All right, so first up, we have got our range. So range is the maximum reading, which in this case, it goes all the way up to 2 volts. Your main divisions, what are your numbered main divisions going up by? And in this case, we're going up by 1 volt at a time because we go from 0 to 1 to 2. So we're going up by 1 volt. Then the smallest divisions are those tick marks in between our main divisions. So if I start at 0 and go all the way up to 1, counting all my tick marks, I have 10 tick marks, which means that we are at 1/10 of a volt for our smallest divisions. All right, next up, our range, we have got 500 PSI or pounds per square inch for this pressure reader. Our main divisions are labeled every 50 pounds per square inch. And then if we look at the in-between tick marks from 0 to 50, if I'm thinking, okay, I've got this many tick marks, I'm going up by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So we are going up by 10 PSI for our smallest divisions for our tick marks. All right, next we're going to read these 2 meters. First is a speedometer, and the next one is reading amps. And we're just going to read A and C and estimate between scale divisions if it's necessary. So first up for our speedometer, we are reading at 5 miles per hour for measurement A. Measurement C falls kind of between 40 and 45, and it seems to be around 42 or 43 is also okay. For B, measurement A is smack dab at 2 amps. And then C, we're going to kind of estimate we are going up by 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we're between 15 and 16. I would say a little bit closer to 16 to 15. So we're approximately at 15.8 amps. All right. Next, we've got non-uniform scales. So here we've got 2 ohm meters. So we're reading ohms. We've got different ranges that have different subdivisions. So you have to pay close attention to where you are on your ohm meter to make sure that you are reading that subdivision correctly. So we're just going to read where the needle ends up. So for A, our needle is ending up at 13 ohms. We're between 10 and 15. So 10, 11, 12, 13 is where our needle ends up. For B, the needle lands at 300 ohms. So we're over here in our 100 ohm section. So we're going up by hundreds each time. So 200, 300, 400, 500. Our needle lands at 300 ohms. All right, up next, we have got a water meter. So you guys can see that we have 6 different gauges making up this water meter. So to set this problem up, we're just going to make 6 blanks, and we're going to go from our highest reading down to our lowest reading. So one little special note as well on this, if your needle falls between 2 different numbers, you're going to pick the smaller one. So first up, we're going to read our 100,000 place for our meter. Our needle falls between 8 and 7. So we're going to go with the smaller value. We're going to pick the 7. Next, looking at our 10,000s. We're between 6 and 5. Even though it looks like it's closer to 6 than 5, you still have to pick the smaller of the 2 values. So we're still picking 5. For our 1,000s, we're between 8 and 9. We're going to go with 8. For our 100s, we are between 2 and 3. We're going to go with 2. For our 10s, we're between 0 and 1. So we're going to go with 0. And then lastly, for our ones place, we're pretty much right on 4. So we're going to go with 4. So last up is our label. We're going to be in cubic feet for this water meter. So we've got 758,204 cubic feet for our measurement. Our electric meter is going to work exactly the same way. So we're always going to pick the smaller between the 2. And we're going to start from our highest decimal place down to our lowest. So first, we have got thousands. We are between 8 and 7, so we're going to go with 7. Our hundreds, we're between 0 and 1. We're going to go with 0. For tens, we're between 2 and 3. we're going to go with 2. And then our ones looks like it's pretty much right on the 1. So we're going to go with 1. Our label is going to be kilowatt hours. So our final answer is 7,021 kilowatt hours. Next up are dial gauges. So for a dial gauge, these ones are going to be kind of special. One thing we have to make sure we look at is if we're reading it to the left or to the right. And you guys are going to look at the arrow up at the top to determine that. So that arrow is pointing to the left, or it's going counterclockwise. Left is going to be a negative measurement. So we're going to make sure to put a negative in front of our answer. The next place you're going to look is the smaller gauge on the inside of the larger one. So that small one is going to be our whole number. It's between 2 and 3. So just like with our water and electric meter, we're going to go with the smaller. So we're going to go with 2. And I put my decimal point right away because my last measurement is going to be 2 point something. So I'm going to look at where that large needle ends up for my last measurement. And that needle lands at 17. So negative 2.17. I'm told we're in millimeters. So my label is going to be millimeters. So negative 2.17 millimeters. All right, next up, we've got another dial gauge. This time we are pointing to the right, which is going to be a positive measurement. So we're going clockwise this time. I'm going to make sure to put a plus out in front. Next place I read is that smaller gauge within. We are between 0.2 and 0.3. We're going to go with the smaller one. We're going to go with 0.2. The last place you look is where this larger needle ends up. And that one ends up at 36. My label is going to be in inches. So I'm at a positive reading of 0.236 inches. All right, last up, we are looking at gauge blocks. Gauge blocks are extremely precise steel rectangular blocks that are used for making, inspecting, or checking tools and devices just to make sure that they're accurate. Here's our list. So there's a large list. We've got several columns to look at. We're going to be using these gauge blocks to determine which ones can be stacked to make a particular measurement. So our measurement, we've got 2.0976 inches. And we're going to stack our gauge blocks so that they total that particular measurement. So what you're going to start by looking at is this end number here. So we have got a 6 in our 10,000ths place. So you're going to be looking at your list of gauge blocks to find one of the measurements that also has a 6 in the 10,000ths place. So the gauge block that matches up is 0.0506. We're going to be subtracting that value off and figure out what our remaining balance is. It's important that you guys start with smallest to biggest. Do not go biggest to smallest, because sometimes what'll happen is you'll take off too much at the beginning and then you won't have any gauge blocks by the end that'll total up to what you have left. So always start with smallest to biggest. So we're going to take off that first gauge block, and here's what's left over. So next, you're going to look for your list of one of the gauge blocks that has a 7 in the thousandths place. And that gauge block is going to be the 0.057. We're going to subtract that off. Here's our remaining balance. We've got 1.99. So now we're looking for a gauge block that has a 9 in the hundredths place. And that's going to be our 0.090. Subtracting that off, we are left with 1.9. So at this point, you're probably checking to see if there's a gauge block that has a 9 in the tenths place. You are not going to find one in your list. We don't have any gauge blocks that have a 9 in the tenths place. So what we need to do is come up with 2 different ones that will end up totaling to 9/10. So we're going to take off the 4/10 first. So 0.4. We're going to subtract that off. and we end up with 1.5. So there's the 1.5 again. So now we've got 5/10, which you have a gauge block that matches up with that. There's our 5/10 gauge block. And we're just left with 1. So our last thing to take off is the 1 whole inch, which gives us 0. So all of our gauge blocks added up, if we were to stack these together, there they all are. All of those total together to give us our original measurement. All right, that is it for today's lesson. So in your homework, you guys can do your 5.4 homework, only sections A, E, F, and G. We will do the rest tomorrow. So only those sections. And just a reminder, our test is coming up. Homework and review are going to be due on Thursday, and the last day of the trimester is Friday. All right, that is it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.